My name is John Harper, and I never imagined that the greatest betrayal of my life would come from the very person I once cradled in my arms. One evening, as I sat down to dinner with my daughter, a chilling text flashed across my phone. Turn on the camera. It's about to happen. In that moment, I had no idea that my own child had forged my name, stolen nearly everything I had built with my late wife, and planned to take even more. What happened next would not only shatter my trust, but also drag our family name into a courtroom. Before we begin, I want to ask you, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more stories that cut this deep. The sound of silverware clinking against porcelain filled the dining room as I tried to focus on the rare warmth of an evening with my daughter. Her laughter, so familiar yet distant these days, echoed softly across the table. For a moment, I let myself believe we were mending the fragile bond that had frayed after Margaret's passing. Then my phone buzzed, and everything shifted. The message was short, brutal, and cold. Turn on the camera. It's about to happen. My heart pounded in my chest, as if someone had reached inside and squeezed it. My eyes darted across the room, half expecting someone to burst through the door, half wondering if this was some cruel prank. I quickly set the phone face down, not wanting Emily to see the tremor in my hand. "Who's texting you?" she asked lightly, sipping her wine. I forced a smile, muttered something about a wrong number, and changed the subject. But my mind was no longer with her. It was consumed by the cryptic warning. What was about to happen? And why did it feel so personal? Moments later, the kitchen door creaked open. My breath caught when I noticed an envelope left on the counter, as if placed there deliberately. I rose from the table, curiosity overriding caution, and opened it. Inside was a check, $5,000 made out to cash. At first I thought it was one of my old records resurfacing some forgotten piece of paperwork. But then I saw the signature. It looked exactly like mine, down to the looping flourish I'd perfected in my 20s. Yet something about it was off, as though someone had practiced the strokes too carefully. My stomach sank. "Dad, what are you doing with that?" Emily's voice cut through the silence. She stood in the doorway, her designer purse dangling from her wrist, her manicured nails tightening around the strap. For a split second, her confident facade slipped, replaced by a flash of panic. I held the check higher, my voice low but steady. "This isn't mine. Tell me the truth, did you write this?" Her eyes darted to the floor, then back to me. "It's not what you think." But I already knew. My own daughter had crossed a line I never imagined possible. The betrayal pierced deeper than any knife. "You forged my signature," I said, each word heavy with disbelief. She stepped forward, desperation creeping into her tone. "I'm in trouble, okay? I didn't know what else to do. The bills are piling up, and I couldn't ask you again after last time." I shook my head slowly. "So you decided to steal instead?" Emily's lips quivered, and for a fleeting second I thought I saw the frightened girl she once was. But then her voice hardened, her eyes flashing with defiance. "It's not stealing. You're my father. You were always going to help me. I just sped things up." Her words hit me like a hammer. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. And for the first time I realized the warning text had been right. Something was about to happen, and it had only just begun. The check trembled between my fingers, as though it carried its own weight of guilt. I stared at Emily, searching for even the smallest glimmer of remorse. But all I saw was a practiced calm, the kind of mask someone wears when they've lied so many times it becomes second nature. "Emily," I said, forcing each syllable through clenched teeth, "you forged my signature." Her lips parted as if to argue, then pressed into a thin line. "Dad, I just needed a little help, she said, her voice cracking for effect. It's not like I was going to keep it from you forever. I didn't know how to ask again. I couldn't help but think back to all the times I had helped her before. The loans I'd covered, the rent I'd paid when she said she was between jobs, the credit cards I'd paid off in silence. Margaret had warned me years ago that Emily's love for money was dangerous, but I had brushed it off as a mother being too harsh. Now her words echoed like thunder in my ears. This isn't help, Emily, I said, lifting the check so she couldn't avoid it. This is fraud. This is theft. From your own father. Something shifted in her eyes, a flicker of defiance replacing the plea. Fraud, theft. Don't make it sound so dramatic. You're my father. You've always had money. Why shouldn't you help me when I need it most? The audacity in her tone stunned me. Because you didn't ask, Emily. You took. You forged my name. My voice wavered and I hated the vulnerability in it. You betrayed me. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the counter. Don't you dare use that word. You think I wanted this. You think I woke up one morning and said, let me trick my father. No, life has been hell since Mom died. The bills, the loneliness, the pressure, it never ends. And you just sit here counting pennies, passing judgment, doing nothing. The mention of Margaret was like salt in an open wound. My chest tightened as memories of her smile, her gentle laugh filled me with both comfort and grief. Your mother, I said quietly, always feared you loved money more than people. She tried to warn me. Emily's face twisted, her voice sharpening. Don't bring Mom into this. She would have understood. She would have helped me. Not stood there waving a stupid check in my face. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so it cut like a blade. Help you by forging checks, by lying to banks. No, Emily. She would have been devastated to see this. For a long moment, we locked eyes, father and daughter, on opposite sides of a canyon too wide to cross. Then she laughed, a short, bitter sound that didn't belong to the little girl I raised. You really think this is about one check? She asked, her tone mocking now. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What do you mean? She slung her purse over her shoulder with jerky movements, gathering things from the table with the precision of someone preparing to run. You have no idea, Dad. None. I stepped toward her, desperation rising in my throat. Emily, what don't I know? She spun around, her eyes blazing. This isn't the first time. It's not even close. And honestly, she shoved the check back toward me with a smirk. I'm not sorry. The words landed like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs. My daughter, my only child, looked at me not with shame, but with contempt. At that moment, I realized the betrayal was deeper than I'd feared. My voice came out hoarse, barely more than a whisper. You mortgaged my house, didn't you? Emily froze her hand on the doorknob. For the first time, real fear flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it with a cold smile. House money accounts. It's all going to be mine one day anyway. Why wait? The words sliced through me. My knees went weak and I steadied myself against the back of a chair. That house wasn't just a piece of property. It was the home Margaret and I had bought together, the place where we raised Emily, where birthdays were celebrated, where Margaret had taken her last breath. It was the core of our family, and now my daughter treated it like a pawn ticket. You had no right, I said, my voice trembling with rage. That was your mother's home, our memories, our life, and you sold it off behind my back as if it meant nothing. Emily crossed her arms, her chin tilting upward in defiance. Don't dramatize it. It's just a house. You still live there, don't you? Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. My voice cracked as I slammed the check down on the table. Everything has changed. You've lied, You've stolen, you've betrayed me in ways I can't even begin to describe. Do you have any idea what you've done?" She shrugged her indifference like acid on my heart. "I've done what I had to do. You don't get it, Dad. You've never understood what it's like to struggle, to need things, and have no one willing to step in. I've stepped in more times than I can count," I thundered, anger boiling over. "Do you think all the times I bailed you out of rent or paid off your cards or gave you cash just disappeared from my memory every time I thought, maybe this will be the last time? Maybe she'll get her life together. But you never did you? You just kept taking." Her eyes hardened, "And you kept giving, so whose fault is that?" The cruelty of her words stole my breath. For a long, heavy moment, we stood locked in silence. My chest heaved, my heart pounding with the painful realization that the little girl who once clung to my hand at the park was gone, replaced by a woman who saw me not as a father, but as a bank account. "Emily," I said finally, my voice low and broken, "when your mother warned me about you, I defended you. I told her she was wrong, that you'd grow out of it, that you were just young. But she was right. She saw what I refused to see. And now you've proven her fears true." Something dark flashed in her eyes. She opened the door wider, letting in the night air. "Maybe Mom was right about more than just money," she said coldly. The meaning behind her words hit me like a fist. Before I could press her, she stepped into the darkness heels, striking the driveway with a rhythm that sounded like a gavel closing on a verdict. The door slammed, leaving me alone with the echo of her contempt. I stood there in the silent house, surrounded by memories of Margaret and the faint perfume Emily left behind. My hands trembled as I picked up the check again. It was more than just paper. It was a key to a truth I wasn't ready to face. If she had mortgaged the house, if she had been forging my name for months, then this was only the beginning of a nightmare. The echo of the slamming door lingered in the house like thunder after a storm. My daughter's words kept circling in my head. "More than you want to know, Dad. Way more." That sentence gnawed at me all night, a riddle I couldn't solve, a confession that hinted at a depth of betrayal I hadn't yet uncovered. I sat in the kitchen until the clock struck midnight, the forged check lying on the table like a wound that wouldn't heal. By dawn, I couldn't sit still anymore. I pulled on my coat and drove into the city, my mind replaying every interaction with Emily over the past year. The missed calls, the excuses about bills, the shopping bags she carried when she claimed she was broke. All of it had been there, the warning signs, but grief after Margaret's death had blinded me. I wanted so badly to believe my daughter was just hurting, just lost. Instead, she had been planning. The bank's marble lobby loomed over me, cold and indifferent. I walked to the reception desk, my legs heavy as if dragging chains. "I need to see someone about fraudulent activity on my account," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. A young woman in her 30s appeared a few minutes later, extending a professional hand. "I'm Sarah Wilson, loan specialist. Please come with me." We sat at her desk, her neat stacks of paperwork standing in stark contrast to the chaos unraveling inside me. I slid the check across to her. "This isn't mine. I didn't write it. But the signature, it looks like me." She examined it carefully, her smile faltering. "I see. Let me pull up your account profile." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, the screen reflecting in her glasses. "Mr. Harper," she said finally, her tone cautious according to our records, "you have an active loan for $500,000. The words froze me in place. "That's impossible. I never took out such a loan." "It was approved 6 months ago," she said, turning the screen toward me. There, in crisp digital clarity, was my signature on a thick stack of documents. Mortgage against my house, multiple credit cards, cash advances, all bearing my name, all approved. I leaned closer, squinting at the looping flourish of the signature so close to mine it made my skin crawl. "This is forgery," I whispered almost to myself. "Oh God, what has she done?" Sarah's eyes softened. "Mr. Harper, the total exposure on these accounts is approximately $700,000. The number struck me like a blow. $700,000. My retirement savings, the equity in the house. Margaret and I had built everything we'd worked for over 40 years. It was gone, hollowed out by my own child. I sat there in stunned silence as Sarah gently pushed a stack of papers toward me. "You'll need to file a police report for identity theft. The bank will investigate, but you should know, with family cases, it's complicated." I clutched the documents with shaking hands. Complicated. That word didn't begin to cover it. This wasn't just financial ruin. It was the death of trust, the destruction of everything I thought I knew about my daughter. When I left the bank, the summer heat slammed into me like a wall, but I felt nothing. The world bustled on, people hurrying to work, sipping their coffees, talking on their phones, while I staggered down the sidewalk with the proof of my daughter's betrayal pressed to my chest. When I stepped back into my house, the documents spread across the kitchen table looked less like papers and more like tombstones. Each one marked the death of a memory, a betrayal etched in ink. I arranged them chronologically, creating a grim timeline of my daughter's deception. November 5,000 on a credit card. December 20,000 personal loan. January another credit card. February $500,000 mortgage against the house. My house. The one Margaret and I had dreamed of in our youth, filled with laughter birthdays and the smell of her Sunday roast. Now it was collateral in my daughter's scheme. I walked into the living room and stood before Margaret's photograph on the mantel. Her smile, frozen in time on our 30th anniversary, seemed to watch me with quiet judgment. "What would you tell me to do?" I asked aloud. She'd warned me years ago. She loves money more than people. I had dismissed it, blinded by a father's loyalty. Now the truth stood before me in black and white, costing $700,000. Sitting back at the table, I picked up a pen and legal pad, forcing my mind to focus. My options were cruelly simple. I could call the police, file charges for identity theft, and send my only daughter to prison. Or I could try to salvage what little relationship we had left, confront her directly, and pray she would take responsibility. But the numbers told their own story. Emily didn't have the means or even the intention to repay me. This wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated theft, repeated over and over until she bled me dry. I stared at her name and my phone thumb hovering over the call button. My heart screamed for reconciliation, for the chance that she might break down crying, admit her guilt, and beg for forgiveness. That was the daughter I still wanted to believe in, the child who once clutched my hand on her first day of school, terrified to let go. But the woman who mortgaged my house, who laughed in my face when I called her a criminal, she was a stranger. Through the window, I saw the old swing set in the backyard, rusted but still standing. I'd built it myself when Emily was 7, spending 3 weekends tightening every bolt, sanding every beam, determined to keep her safe. The irony twisted in my gut. I had spent my life protecting her, and she had grown into the very danger I now needed protection from. My phone buzzed on the table, jolting me from my thoughts. A text from Mike Reynolds, my old partner from the neighborhood, retired NYPD. "Haven't seen you in weeks. Coffee this afternoon." His timing was uncanny. Mike had seen every shade of human betrayal during his career. Maybe he could see what I couldn't. Maybe he would know what to do when your own child destroys your life. I set the papers back into their folder, the weight of them crushing me even as I held them in my hands. My heart was torn between loyalty and justice, between love and the cold reality of numbers that didn't lie. Emily had left me no good choices, only the worst ones. I sat across from Sarah Wilson once more, the neat stacks of her paperwork, standing in contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. My folder of evidence lay open on the desk, the forged signatures glaring at me like scars I couldn't erase. "Show me everything," I told her. My voice carried a firmness that surprised even me. Sarah nodded, typing rapidly. "Mr. Harper, I've compiled your entire credit history over the past 12 months. Every loan, every card, every transaction." She turned the monitor toward me, scrolling down line after line of accounts I never opened. Each one bore my name, each one sealed with a counterfeit flourish of my signature. I leaned closer, eyes narrowing on the digital pages. There was no room for doubt now. "This is systematic fraud," I said quietly, my jaw tightening. "Not a single mistake, not a misunderstanding. She's been planning this for months." Sarah hesitated, then slid a printed packet across the desk. "This is your official account history. It details every unauthorized loan. You'll need these for the police report. I understand this is difficult, especially because it involves a family member, but if you don't act quickly, your assets could be seized." The word "seized" made my chest tighten. The house, Margaret's house, my retirement, the nest egg we had spent decades building. I took the packet with shaking hands, the papers heavier than steel. "I can't lose the house," I murmured half to myself. "You need to file with the authorities immediately," Sarah said gently. "The longer you wait, the more complicated this becomes." I nodded but didn't answer. My heart and my head waged a silent war. To turn Emily in would be to betray my only living family, but to stay silent would destroy me completely. I thought of Margaret, of how she used to tell me that love without boundaries wasn't love at all, it was enabling. Was I enabling Emily, or was I protecting her? As I walked out of the bank, the summer air felt thin, as though even the city itself judged my hesitation. I clutched the folder to my chest and made my way home, each step heavier than the last. Back at the kitchen table, I spread the documents again. The numbers lined up like an army against me. I wrote in my legal pad, Option 1, call the police. Option 2, confront Emily privately. My hand shook as I underlined the first option twice. My mind told me it was the only path forward, but my heart refused to let go of the possibility that my daughter might turn back from the edge. The phone rang, suddenly jolting me. I stared at the caller ID, Emily. My thumb hovered over the answer button, my pulse quickening. I wanted to hear her voice, to demand answers, to beg her to see reason. But I couldn't. Not yet. I let it ring until the voicemail clicked on her recorded voice, filling the kitchen. I pressed the folder shut and whispered to Margaret's photograph, "I'll find a way to fight this. I won't let her destroy everything we built." The papers sat stacked neatly in the folder, but their presence filled the house like smoke, choking me with every glance. I carried them into the living room, hoping a change of scenery might ease the pressure, but it didn't. Margaret's photograph still watched me from the mantel, that serene smile she wore on our 30th anniversary. She had always been the realist between us, the one who spoke truth even when it stung. Now I wished more than anything she were still here to tell me what to do. I sat down heavily in my armchair, the leather creaking under my weight. The phone sat on the side table, her contact glowing on the screen. The bank officer's words repeated in my mind, "File with the authorities immediately." My hand hovered over the receiver, ready to dial the police, but my chest constricted with a sharp ache. Could I really condemn my daughter to prison? I closed my eyes and memory overtook me. Emily, at 6 years old, tugging at my sleeve on Christmas morning. Her hair tangled from sleep, but her eyes wide with joy at the dollhouse Margaret and I had stayed up all night assembling. Emily at 15, slamming the door after an argument about curfew, shouting that I didn't understand her. Emily at 21, walking across the stage at graduation, Margaret squeezing my hand with pride. Those flashes of the past, played like a cruel film, clashing with the woman who now forged checks, mortgaged my house, and laughed when I called her a criminal. I rubbed my temples, the weight of contradiction pressing down. The law was clear. She had stolen, deceived, and broken every boundary of trust. But my heart whispered that she was still my daughter, my flesh and blood. Margaret's voice echoed in memory. "One day, John, you'll have to stop rescuing her. Otherwise, she'll drag you down with her." The clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second demanding a decision. My thumb pressed against the digits on the phone, 9-1. I froze before pressing the final number. My breathing came ragged. The thought of Emily in handcuffs, her name splashed across court documents, her future in ruins. It felt unbearable. I slammed the phone back onto the table, the clatter echoing through the empty room. "Not yet," I muttered, my voice shaking. Not yet. Instead, I opened my notebook and began to write. Maybe if I confronted Emily directly, I could salvage something: her dignity, my peace, the memory of Margaret's hope for our family. But even as I wrote option 2, confront Emily privately, I knew it was a weak lifeline, one stretched thin by her cold words and callous laughter. The swing set outside caught my eye again, through the window, rusted but still upright after all these years. I'd built it strong, determined that Emily would be safe as she swung higher and higher. Now I realized the bitter irony: all my care, all my effort, and she'd grown into the danger I never saw coming. I pressed the pen hard against the page until it tore through the paper. My grief was no longer passive. It was beginning to turn into something else, something sharper. I must have rehearsed the words a dozen times in my head, pacing the kitchen with the folder clutched like a shield. Finally, I picked up the phone, my thumb trembling as I pressed her number. The line rang 4 times before Emily's voice came through, cool and impatient. "What do you want, Dad?" I steadied my breathing, gripping the table until my knuckles turned white. "Emily, I know about the $500,000 loan, the mortgage against the house. Explain this to me." Silence. For a moment I thought she'd hung up. In the background I could hear faint television laughter, some sitcom mocking the seriousness of our conversation. Then she said, her voice clipped, "What loan?" But I caught it, the falter in her tone, the uncertainty leaking through. "Don't play games with me," I snapped, my voice rising. "The bank showed me everything. 12 forged documents. 12 credit cards, personal loans, cash advances. $700,000 in my name." The television on her end clicked off. I imagined her hand fumbling for the remote, panic breaking through her icy composure. Her reply came smaller now, fragile, almost childlike. "You went to the bank. I had to know how deep this went," I said, my voice shaking. "And now I do." I picked up one of the documents from the table, reading it aloud. November 15th, personal loan $20,000. December 3rd, new credit card. January 10th, cash advance. "Stop," she shouted suddenly, her voice cracking. "Just stop, okay?" I gritted my teeth, but I didn't stop. February 2nd, $500,000 mortgaged against my house. The house your mother and I bought, where we raised you, where she died. And you put it on paper, like it was nothing. Her tone shifted, growing sharp again, anger replacing fear. "You always think about money, don't you? What about what I've been going through? What about my problems?" My fist slammed against the table. Your problems, you created them. Emily, you forged my name. You stole from me. $700,000 gone. I didn't steal, she snapped back, her breathing heavy. I needed help. And you're always so stingy. Mom understood me, but you just judge. The mention of Margaret made my chest ache as if she'd been pulled back into the room only to be insulted. Don't you dare use your mother to justify this, I said coldly. She would be ashamed of what you've become. Shamed, Emily's laugh was bitter broken. She understood me better than you ever did. You never got it. You still don't. I call it survival, Dad. And if you can't see that maybe Mom was right about more than just money. Her words stunned me. What's that supposed to mean? You figure it out yourself. Then the line went dead. I stood there holding the silent phone, the hum of the disconnected call ringing louder than any sound. For the first time, I realized Emily wasn't going to come back. Crying wasn't going to apologize. This wasn't panic or desperation anymore. It was who she had chosen to become. And that truth hurt worse than the debt. By morning, my eyes burned from another sleepless night. The folder of bank statements lay spread across the table like evidence in a courtroom, and I felt like both the victim and the accused. I needed perspective, someone who understood criminals in a way I never could. That's when I thought of Mike Reynolds, my neighbor, my closest friend, and a man who had spent 25 years with the NYPD before retiring. If anyone could help me see clearly, it was him. I knocked on his apartment door just after noon. Mike opened it within seconds, his weathered face etched with concern. "John, you look like hell," he said, stepping aside. The smell of strong coffee filled his kitchen. "I need advice," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "From someone who knows criminals." We sat at his scarred wooden table, the same one where we'd played countless games of cards. I slid the folder across to him. Papers spilled out like accusations, each one bearing my name forged in my daughter's hand. Mike picked up a loan document, his gray eyes scanning it carefully. He didn't interrupt as I recounted everything from the forged check to Emily's cold words on the phone. When I finished, he set the paper down slowly. $500,000 against your house, he muttered. "John, this isn't some bad habit. This is a serious crime, multiple felonies." My throat tightened. "But she's my daughter. I can't put her in prison." Mike leaned back, arms crossed, studying me with the patience of someone who had heard every excuse in the book. "And if you don't act, she'll destroy you financially." "Have you thought about that?" I had. All night I had stared at the ceiling, hearing Margaret's voice warning me. Still saying it aloud felt like betrayal. "Give me a little more time," I pleaded. "Maybe she'll come to her senses." He shook his head. "In my experience, people who commit this level of fraud don't suddenly grow a conscience. This isn't a shoplifter stealing candy. This is organized, systematic theft." She knew exactly what she was doing. I rubbed my forehead, fighting the sting of tears. "She's not some street criminal. She's my daughter." "She's both," Mike said firmly. "Family or not, 700 grand in fraud is still 700 grand. His bluntness stung, but I couldn't deny the truth. "What would you do if it were your kid?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Mike's expression softened slightly. "I'd want to believe they could change too. But I'd protect myself first." I stared at him, desperate. "How file a police report? Get it documented officially. Even if you don't press charges right away, you need legal protection." The thought of walking into a police station telling strangers that my daughter had stolen from me made my stomach churn. "I can't. Not yet." Mike studied me for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, his tone lowering. "Fine. But promise me something. Don't sign anything she puts in front of you. Don't give her a cent more. And for God's sake, keep these documents safe. They're your only proof." I nodded slowly, gathering the papers back into the folder. Mike's words weighed heavy, "Protect yourself first." But even as I left his apartment, I couldn't help wondering, was I protecting myself or abandoning the last piece of family I had left? I left Mike's apartment with the folder tucked under my arm, his words echoing in my head. Protect yourself first. They sounded simple, but in practice they felt like a mountain I couldn't climb. Every step back toward my house, I kept thinking about Emily, her laughter as a child, the way she used to curl up next to Margaret on the couch. The girl who once begged me to read her bedtime stories. That girl still existed somewhere, didn't she? Maybe if I gave her time, she would come back to me. At home, I set the folder down on the kitchen table once more. The house felt emptier than ever, haunted by both Margaret's absence and Emily's betrayal. I poured myself a glass of water, trying to steady my hands, but the tremor wouldn't stop. I told myself Emily would call. She had to. No daughter could ignore the damage she had caused forever. 3 days passed in silence. The phone remained stubbornly still, her name never lighting the screen. Each evening, I sat at the table staring at those papers, imagining different conversations we might have. In one, she broke down sobbing, promising to fix everything. In another, she raged at me, defiant as ever. I rehearsed my lines, my pleas, my threats, but none of it mattered. The silence was its own answer. What I didn't know then was that Mike had already made up his mind. While I sat drowning in hesitation, clinging to hope, like a man clutching driftwood, Mike was moving. He knew me well enough to see that I would never take the step I needed to save myself. So he did what came naturally to him. He went into detective mode. While I sat sleepless at night, Mike was outside tailing Emily. His instincts, honed over decades in the NYPD, had never dulled. He followed her discreetly, camera in hand, watching as she met men twice her age in expensive restaurants. Elderly men, vulnerable men, the same kind of easy targets she had turned me into. She smiled, charmed, leaned close over candlelight. And then almost certainly she began weaving the same web of lies about Bill's desperation survival. Mike documented it all. Photos, times, places. He built a case the way only a cop could, methodical and cold. He knew the courts would never take just my word against hers. They needed evidence, and he intended to provide it. Meanwhile, I clung to my fragile illusions. I watered the plants Margaret had loved, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. I told myself Emily was thinking soul-searching, preparing to return with apologies. I even bought her favorite white roses from the shop on 7th Avenue, the same ones Margaret used to get her every birthday. They sat in a vase on the counter, their petals wilting with each passing day of silence. I didn't realize those roses were symbols not of reconciliation, but of denial. While I waited for my daughter to call, my best friend was already pulling the truth out into the open. And soon, very soon, his actions would collide with my hesitation in a way that would change everything. On the third evening of silence, I sat alone at the kitchen table, poking at a microwave dinner that had gone cold before I touched it. The white roses I had bought for Emily drooped in their vase, their heads bowed like they too were weary of waiting. Then my phone rang. My phone. My heart lurched when I saw her name glowing on the screen. Emily. I pressed the green button with trembling fingers. "Hello, hi, Dad." Her voice was soft, hesitant, almost shy, the opposite of the harsh, defiant tone I'd heard last time. "I've been thinking about our conversation, about everything." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Relief surged through me like a wave. "Emily? I wasn't sure I'd ever hear from you again." "I know," she whispered. I was angry, scared. I said things I didn't mean, but I realize now I hurt you, really hurt you, and I want to make it right. Her words landed like balm on an open wound. I closed my eyes, almost daring to believe them. Sweetheart, I want that too. More than anything. Then let's do this properly, she said, a smile threading into her tone. Come to dinner tomorrow night. I'll cook your favorite pot roast with carrots just like Mom used to make. We'll go through the papers together, and we'll figure this out. As a family, tears pricked at my eyes. Margaret's pot roast. Emily hadn't cooked it since the funeral. My throat tightened. Of course, I said. I'll be there, 7 o'clock. And Dad, she added softly. Yes, I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. When the call ended, I sat there grinning like a fool, the sound of her gentle words still echoing in my ears. The Emily I had raised, the girl who once curled up beside Margaret, begging for bedtime stories that Emily was back. I convinced myself that her coldness, her betrayal, had only been fear speaking. Now she was ready to face the truth with me. The next day, I prepared carefully. I pressed my best navy suit, the one Margaret always said made my eyes look younger. I gathered the bank papers in order, each one marked with sticky notes so we could work through them. I even slipped Margaret's engagement ring into my pocket, the one I'd always planned to pass down to Emily on her wedding day. Maybe I would give it to her tonight as a symbol of trust restored. At 6:30, I carried the briefcase and a fresh dozen white roses into a cab bound for Manhattan. For the first time in weeks, I felt something that resembled hope. Perhaps tomorrow I would still face lawyers, debts, and consequences. But tonight, I would get my daughter back. What I didn't realize was that Emily's invitation wasn't a bridge back to family. It was a trap she had set with precision, and I was walking straight into it. The cab dropped me off in front of Emily's sleek glass and steel building in Manhattan. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, clutching the briefcase in one hand and the bouquet of white roses in the other. My reflection in the polished doors looked older than I remembered, lines etched deeper from weeks of sleepless nights. Still, there was a spark in my eyes, hope fragile but alive. The elevator ride up felt endless. My palms were damp, and I found myself humming under my breath, something I hadn't done since Margaret died. When the doors slid open, Emily was waiting in the hallway, radiant in the blue dress I had bought her last Christmas. She rushed forward and hugged me tightly, her perfume sweet but unfamiliar. "Dad, you look wonderful," she said, her smile wide and warm. "White roses, you remembered." Her apartment smelled of pot roast, and for a fleeting moment I felt as though I had stepped back into the past. The table was set with good china candles flickering between crystal glasses. It was the kind of dinner Margaret used to prepare for holidays, and the nostalgia nearly brought me to tears. "This is beautiful, Emily," I said softly. "I wanted tonight to be special," she replied, taking the briefcase from my hand and setting it gently on the side table. "A new beginning for us." She guided me to the couch and poured 2 glasses of Merlot. "I got the one you like," she said with a proud smile. "Let's toast to reconciliation." We clinked glasses, and I studied her face, searching for cracks in the mask I feared she wore. But she held my gaze steadily, her eyes glistening with what looked like sincerity. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to relax. As we ate, she kept the conversation light, stories about her work, old memories of Margaret, jokes from her childhood that made us both laugh. The pot roast tasted exactly as I remembered, savory and tender, and I couldn't help but feel Margaret's presence at the table. My heart ached with a bittersweet mix of grief and gratitude. But beneath the glow of candlelight, small details tugged at me. Scattered bills peeked from under a stack of magazines on the coffee table. Credit card statements and overdue notices, their red stamps half hidden but unmistakable. Emily's leg bounced beneath the table, nervous energy betraying her calm smile. And each time her eyes flickered toward the briefcase on the side table, I felt a ripple of unease. Between bites of roast, she asked, "How much did you say the total was again?" 700,000, I said carefully, setting down my fork. "But the important thing is, we're going to fix it together." She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Absolutely. That's what tonight is all about." Her fingers tapped lightly against her wine glass, a rhythm of anticipation. Something in my gut whispered that this wasn't about reconciliation at all. But I silenced the thought, choosing to believe the daughter I loved had finally come home. I couldn't have been more wrong. I cut another piece of roast, savoring the taste that brought back decades of family dinners. For a few blissful minutes, I let myself believe this was real, that my daughter and I were on the path to healing. Then Emily set down her glass, leaned forward, and her smile shifted from warm to calculating. "Dad?" She began, her tone suddenly businesslike. "I've been thinking about the logistics of fixing this situation. The debt, the loans, the accounts, it's a lot. But I have an idea." I froze fork halfway to my mouth. "What kind of idea?" She folded her hands as if rehearsed. "To pay everything back, I'll need capital. Seed money, really. Just a small loan to get me started, say 100,000. With the right investments, I can flip it into enough profit to cover the 700,000 and more." The fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against the plate. My appetite evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. 100,000, I repeated slowly. "Emily, you already forged my name and stole $700,000, and now you're asking me to give you more." Her eyes narrowed, irritation flashing across her face. "It's not giving, Dad. It's investing. You want your money back, don't you? This is how we make it happen." I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. "Emily, this is absurd. You committed multiple felonies. You mortgaged my home. And now you're trying to spin this as a business proposal." Her mask slipped further. The warmth in her voice vanished, replaced by a sharp edge. "You're being incredibly short-sighted. You can't expect me to pull 700 grand out of thin air. I need leverage, and you're sitting on it." I stared at her across the candlelit table, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "Do you even hear yourself? You've destroyed my trust, nearly ruined my future, and you have the nerve to ask for more." Emily stood, her hands slamming against the table. The glasses rattled, red wine spilling across the white tablecloth like blood. "Everything I did was for survival. You think it's easy out here living in this city, trying to maintain even a shred of dignity. I did what I had to do." My voice cracked with fury. "By destroying mine, by gambling with the house your mother loved, by using my name like a tool." Her expression hardened, cold as steel. "You don't get it, Dad. This isn't about you anymore. When you die, all of this becomes mine anyway. I just needed some of it now." The words struck me harder than any blow could. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The woman standing before me wasn't my daughter. She was a stranger who had already calculated my death as a business opportunity. The candles flickered in the silence, casting shadows across her face. And in those shadows, I saw the truth I had been refusing to face. Emily hadn't invited me here to reconcile. She had invited me to drain me one last time. The silence between us stretched heavy and suffocating. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, while Emily stood tall, eyes blazing with a twisted conviction. Do you know what it's like, Dad? She demanded, her voice sharp as glass. To watch everyone else get ahead while I'm left drowning. To claw for scraps while you sit comfortably with your little nest egg. My throat tightened. Nest egg, Emily, that nest egg is 40 years of your mother's and my work. It's every late night, every sacrifice, every dollar we saved so we could retire in peace. It wasn't built for you to burn through like kindling. Her laugh was bitter hollow. Retire in peace, don't you get it? Peace is a luxury I've never had. You think I care about your sacrifices. All I see is money sitting in accounts, property gathering dust while I'm fighting to survive in this city. So yes, I took what I needed. Because when you're gone, it's all mine anyway. The words felt like knives cutting deeper with every syllable. You're talking about my death, I whispered, disbelief thick in my voice. Your own father's death, as if it's just a transaction. She didn't flinch. Don't act so shocked. Everyone dies, Dad. You can't take it with you. So why not let me use it now when I actually need it? I rose from my chair, my legs trembling with rage and heartbreak. Because it's not about money, Emily. It's about trust, about values, about everything your mother and I tried to teach you. And you've thrown it all away for greed. Her face hardened, the last veneer of daughterly affection stripped away. Greed, call it survival. Call it ambition. I don't care. What I do care about is that you finally see me for who I am, and that you stop pretending you can control me. I stared at her, struggling to reconcile the woman before me with the little girl who once ran to me after scraping her knee, tears streaming down her face. That child had wanted comfort. This woman wanted control, power, wealth, and she didn't care who she crushed to get it. You disappoint me, I said quietly, my voice breaking. Not because of the money, but because you've lost your soul. Her eyes narrowed, glinting with something dark. No, Dad, you're the disappointment. Too weak to see the world for what it is. Too blinded by your so-called morals to grab what's yours. Mom knew. She understood me. You never did. At that moment, I realized there was no reaching her. No amount of pleading or reasoning would undo the choices she'd made. She had built her identity on deceit, and she wore it now like armor. She pointed toward the briefcase on the side table, her voice cold. Take your self-righteous speeches and get out. And leave those papers. They don't belong to you anymore, they belong to me. I moved toward the briefcase, but so did she. Our hands collided on the leather handle, and for a tense heartbeat, father and daughter stood inches apart, locked in a silent war. In her eyes, I saw not regret, not love, but calculation, the kind that said she was willing to fight me for the very evidence of her betrayal. Our hands tightened on the briefcase, the leather handle creaking under the strain. Her nails dug into my skin as she snarled, "Let go, Dad. You don't need these anymore." I met her glare, my voice low but steady. These papers are proof of everything you've done. You think I'm just going to hand them over so you can bury the evidence? Her eyes narrowed, pupils sharp as a predator's. If you cared about me at all, you'd let this go. You'd give me the chance to fix it my way. I shook my head. Your way, Emily, your way is fraud, lies, and destruction. You've already stolen nearly everything I built. Now you want me to help you steal more. Her expression twisted with fury. You always see me as a disappointment. You never believed in me, never trusted me. Well, I don't need your trust anymore. I'll get what I need one way or another. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. She yanked the briefcase hard, nearly pulling me off balance. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I couldn't reach it. For a moment, I thought she might actually strike me. The daughter I had raised now looked more like an adversary than blood. Then the pounding came, heavy, commanding knocks against the apartment door. Emily froze, her grip faltering. The door burst open, and uniformed officers flooded the room with sharp voices and brighter flashlights than the candles could compete with. "Police, step aside," one shouted. Emily's face went pale, her body stiffening as two officers moved swiftly toward her. She stumbled back, hands raised instinctively, the briefcase slipping from her grasp and landing with a dull thud at my feet. I stood there in shock, unable to process how quickly everything had shifted. Only moments earlier, I had been locked in a private war with my daughter. Now strangers were moving through her apartment, with the precision of soldiers, snapping photographs of the scattered bills, bagging documents, documenting every detail of the chaos she had tried to hide. Detective Morrison, a tall man with sharp features, approached me calmly. "Mr. Harper will need a formal statement about the crimes committed against you. This evidence will be crucial." My mouth went dry. "But how did you know to come tonight? How did you know what was happening?" He exchanged a glance with his partner before answering. "Let's just say you have very caring friends. Someone with law enforcement experience gave us a tip that tonight would be the perfect time to make an arrest." My hands trembled as the realization dawned. Mike. It had to be Mike. Emily, now in handcuffs, turned her face toward me, her eyes blazing with betrayal. "You did this to me," she hissed. "You called them." I shook my head slowly, grief pressing into my chest like a weight. "No, Emily. You did this to yourself." As the officers led her out, her heels clattered against the hardwood floor, the sound echoing in my ears long after the apartment fell silent again. I bent down, lifted the briefcase, and held it close, not as a shield this time, but as proof that the truth had finally been dragged into the light. The apartment felt like a crime scene long after Emily had been taken away. Officers moved methodically through each room, photographing scattered documents, boxing up evidence, their radios crackling with clipped voices. I stood by the window, staring down at the flashing lights that washed the street below in red and blue. My phone buzzed again, still vibrating with the message I hadn't been able to check, while grappling with Emily Turn on the camera. It's about to happen. Detective Morrison approached, his notebook in hand, his tone calm but firm. "Mr. Harper, we'll need your testimony to establish the timeline of the fraud. Your statements will be key to building the case." I nodded numbly. Words felt useless in that moment, like paper boats on a storm tide. "Detective," I managed, "how did you know to come tonight? How did you know she would—" My throat caught before I could finish. Morrison's eyes softened with something close to pity. "You have friends who care about you, Mr. Harper. One of them called us, gave us detailed information, and suggested tonight would be the best time to intervene. The moment she tried to pressure you for more money, we would have the evidence we needed." The answer landed with both relief and shock. A friend. Law enforcement experience. My mind didn't need to search long. It was Mike. My old neighbor. My best friend. "Mike Reynolds," I whispered. Morrison gave a small nod as if confirming what I already knew. "He's a good man, knew what he was talking about. Without his information, we wouldn't have been able to move this quickly." I sank into the nearest chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. The sting of betrayal from Emily was still raw, but now it mingled with something else. An ache of gratitude tinged with humiliation. I hadn't been the one to protect myself. Mike had stepped in where I couldn't. When the last of the officers packed up the boxes and left, I found myself alone again. The candles burned down to waxy puddles, the smell of pot roast hanging heavy in the air. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Mike's contact. My thumb hovered over his name, just as it had so many times before when I couldn't bring myself to call Emily. Only this time the hesitation wasn't fear, it was shame. Finally, I pressed the button. He answered on the first ring. John. His voice was steady, knowing. You organized the arrest, didn't you? I asked. There was no pause. Yes, I did. The honesty hit me harder than a denial ever could. My throat tightened. Why, Mike, why go behind my back? Because you couldn't do it yourself, he said simply. You love her too much to see her clearly. But I could. And I wasn't about to stand by and let her destroy you. I closed my eyes, the tears I'd been holding back, finally breaking loose. In that moment, I realized that true loyalty sometimes meant making the hardest choices for the people who couldn't make them for themselves. I gripped the phone tighter, my breath uneven. You followed her, Mike. You were watching my daughter without telling me. On the other end, his sigh carried the weight of decades in uniform. John Larby didn't have a choice. The moment you walked out of my apartment with those papers, I knew you'd never take action. You'd wait. You'd hope. You'd let her bleed you dry until there was nothing left. So I did what I've always done, protect the people who can't see the danger for themselves. The words stung, not because they weren't true, but because they were. What did you find? I asked quietly. I tailed her for 3 days. Mike said, his voice steady, methodical, the old detective tone I'd heard him use years ago when he recounted cases over beers. She wasn't subtle. Meetings in restaurants, cafes, even hotel lobbies. And it wasn't just you she was milking. She was already working new marks, older men, lonely men, the kind she could charm easily. Same pattern every time. She'd lean in, whisper about debt, flash crocodile tears, and walk away with promises of money. I got photos, times, locations. She was building a scheme. John and you were just one of many victims. I pressed my free hand to my forehead, the room spinning. My Emily, my flesh and blood, had been running cons like a seasoned criminal. Not just desperation, not just a mistake, but a system. Mike continued, his tone firm, but not unkind. I took everything I had, your documents, my surveillance photos, and went straight to Morrison. He's an old colleague of mine, one of the good ones. They'd already been looking for someone fitting her description. My evidence tied it all together. That's why they moved so fast. The pieces clicked into place, the text message, the timing of the police, the way the detectives had seemed prepared. It had all been Mike's doing. That text, during dinner. Turn on the camera, that was you. Yes, he said without hesitation. I needed video of her demanding more money, proof that she wasn't planning restitution. When she grabbed for your briefcase, I knew we had enough. That's when I called Morrison to move in. I sank deeper into my chair, torn between gratitude and humiliation. You should have told me. No, John, Mike said firmly. If I'd told you, you'd have warned her. Or you'd have tried to stop me. And then she would have kept going, finding another way to drain you. Sometimes protecting a friend means keeping him in the dark until it's too late for him to sabotage his own safety. His bluntness cut, but underneath it was something else, love. Not the fragile, conditional love of blood ties, but the steady loyalty of a man who had walked beside me for decades, who refused to watch me be destroyed by my own blind hope. You think I betrayed you? Mike added gently. But the truth is, I saved you from betraying yourself. I couldn't speak. I stared at the scattered roses on my counter petals falling one by one, realizing that while my daughter had set a trap to strip me bare, my best friend had built one to save me. The silence between us stretched across the phone line until I finally forced the words out. Targeting others. You mean she wasn't just stealing from me? Mike's voice carried no hesitation. No, John. You weren't her only victim, you were just the easiest one. She had a pattern. She'd charm older men, especially widowers. She knew what buttons to push. Sympathy, loneliness, guilt. Same way she worked you only with strangers who didn't know her history. I pressed my palm to my eyes, shame and fury burning hot together. So while I was defending her, believing she was lost and broken, she was out there sharpening her skills on other people. That's the truth, Mike said, steady as ever. I watched her walk into a diner on Tuesday morning. Sat across from a man with a cane. He looked at her like she was his salvation. She walked out with his hand on hers and a promise to help her with her troubles. The very same lines she fed you. The image carved into my chest like a blade. My Emily, the child I had carried on my shoulders at the fair, the teenager I had scolded for sneaking out, was now manipulating men her father's age and worse. And I had called it survival. I had made excuses. Why didn't I see it? I muttered half to myself. Margaret warned me years ago. She said Emily's love for money would destroy her one day. I defended her, told Margaret she was just young and misunderstood. But Margaret saw it, Mike. She saw it before I did. There was a long pause, then Mike's voice softened. You saw it too. You just didn't want to admit it. That's what makes you a father. You kept believing there was a way back for her. I clenched my jaw, my eyes fixed on Margaret's picture above the mantel. She had been right. She had always been right. What happens now? I asked. The DA's office has everything they need, Mike explained. Morrison will push for charges on identity theft, bank fraud, and forgery. With the documents you kept, plus the video from last night, it's airtight. She'll face prison time. Prison. The word sat heavy in my chest. I pictured Emily in an orange jumpsuit, her sharp eyes dulled by fluorescent lights and concrete walls. My only child locked away. A part of me recoiled at the thought. Another part whispered it was the only path left. She won't stop, otherwise Mike continued, his tone firmer now. She was already expanding her circle, John. If she hadn't been arrested, you'd be bankrupt within the year. And she would have found her next target while you picked up the pieces. I swallowed hard, my throat aching. So it's not just about justice for me. It's about stopping her before she ruins more lives. That's exactly it, Mike said. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity settle over me. It wasn't the peace of forgiveness or the hope of reconciliation. It was the cold, steady realization that some battles have to end in consequence. Emily had crossed too many lines, and this time someone had to draw one for her. I looked at Margaret's photo again and whispered, I'm sorry I didn't listen to you sooner. The federal courthouse in Manhattan rose before me like a fortress, its limestone columns stark against the morning sky. I walked up the steps beside Mike, my best suit, clinging uncomfortably in the July heat. My stomach churned, not from nerves alone, but from the weight of what I was about to do. Today wasn't about bank accounts or signatures. It was about standing in front of a judge and telling the world that my own daughter had betrayed me. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and paper, the silence broken only by the shuffle of attorneys and the rustle of files. At the defendant's table, Emily sat in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back tightly, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. She didn't look up when I entered. For a fleeting moment, I wished she would wish to see some spark of recognition, some shred of the girl I once knew. But she remained cold, distant, unreachable. Judge Patricia Thornton presided, her gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving her the air of someone who had seen every kind of human failing. After a series of motions and formalities, the clerk called my name. Mr. John Harper, would you like to provide a victim impact statement? My legs felt heavy as I rose, clutching the paper I had written and rewritten a dozen times. At the podium, my voice trembled at first. but grew stronger with each word. Your Honor, my daughter stole $700,000 from me over the course of 11 months. She forged my signature, opened accounts in my name, and mortgaged my home without my knowledge. She drained the savings my late wife and I spent 40 years building. I glanced toward Emily, but she didn't look at me. My throat tightened, but I pressed on. The financial damage is staggering, but that isn't the worst part. The worst part is the betrayal. She took my love, my trust, and twisted it into a weapon against me. Even when confronted, she showed no remorse. Instead of apologizing, she demanded more money. She told me when I die, it would all be hers anyway. Those words will never leave me. My voice faltered, but I steadied it. I love my daughter. That will never change. But love without accountability is not love, it's destruction. For her sake and for the sake of every other person she might harm, she needs to face the consequences of her choices. I stepped back, my hands shaking, and sat down beside Mike. For the first time, Emily raised her eyes to me. They were wet, but I couldn't tell if it was regret or anger. When her turn came, she stood slowly, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry for what I did to my father. I was desperate and made terrible choices. She paused, and for a moment her lips tightened into something that felt rehearsed, but I never stopped loving him. Judge Thornton's gavel struck like a thunderclap. Emily Harper, you are hereby sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for identity theft, document forgery, and bank fraud. You are also ordered to provide full restitution of $700,000. The sound of the gavel closing echoed like a door slamming shut. Emily's shoulders shook, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she looked at me fully. I hope you're happy now, she whispered as they led her away. I swallowed hard, my voice low. I just hope you learn responsibility. The gavel's echo still rang in my ears as I stepped out of the courtroom, the weight of the sentencing pressing down on me. My legs felt like they were moving through water, each step heavy with exhaustion and relief. Beside me, Mike walked in silence, his presence as steady as it had been through every storm of my life. Outside, the July sun hit us like a wall of heat. For a moment, I just stood there on the courthouse steps, staring at the city rushing past, as if nothing had happened. People carried coffee cups, hailed cabs, scrolled their phones. My world had just been shattered and rebuilt in the span of an hour, and yet the city moved on indifferent. Mike adjusted his tie, glancing at me. Justice has been served, John. Not the way you wanted it, but the way it needed to be. I nodded, my throat tightening. It doesn't feel like victory. It's not supposed to, he said simply. It's supposed to be peace. We walked slowly down the steps, our shadows stretching long in the afternoon sun. For weeks I had been drowning in guilt, torn between protecting my daughter and protecting myself. Now the decision had been made for me. Emily would spend 4 years in federal prison paying back what she could. It was justice, yes, but it was also final. She looked at me, I said after a long silence, right before they took her away. I don't know if it was anger or regret. Maybe both. Mike stopped turning to me with that detective's calm he never lost. You can't carry her feelings with you. That's her burden now. Yours is to rebuild what she broke. His words sank deep. Rebuild. That was the part I had avoided thinking about. My finances would take time to recover, but they could be mended. What haunted me more was the fracture in my heart, the gaping wound of knowing my only child had looked at me as a means to an end, not as a father. We reached his old Honda, parked crookedly along the curb. He opened the driver's side door, then paused. You know, Margaret always said you were too soft on her. She wasn't wrong. But she also knew you had a good heart. That's not a weakness, John. It's why you're still standing." I exhaled slowly, the tension I'd carried for months finally loosening. I just wish I hadn't confused love with blind loyalty. Maybe if I'd drawn the line earlier. Maybe Mike interrupted gently. But maybe this was the only way she'd ever face herself. As we drove back to Brooklyn, the city blurring past the windows, I felt something I hadn't in months: peace. Not joy, not relief, but a steady calm that came from knowing the truth was no longer hidden. Margaret had always said that love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's harm. She'd been right. I turned to Mike, my voice low. "Thank you for doing what I couldn't." He gripped the steering wheel, his eyes on the road. "That's what friends are for, John. To stand where family fails." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. Looking back on everything I've learned, that sometimes the hardest part of love is knowing when to draw the line. I spent years confusing sacrifice with devotion, telling myself that giving more was the same as loving more. But the truth is, love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's enabling. My daughter's betrayal forced me to face that reality. It wasn't just about the $700,000 or the mortgage on my house. It was about dignity, trust, and the values Margaret and I had built together. Watching Emily taken away in handcuffs was one of the most painful moments of my life. Yet for the first time, I felt peace. Justice had stepped in where my loyalty had blinded me. I realized that sometimes protecting someone means refusing to cover for their mistakes, even when it breaks your heart. If you're a parent, I want you to think carefully. Are you helping your children grow, or are you shielding them from accountability? Because as I learned the hard way, shielding them can destroy you both. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a betrayal from someone you loved deeply? How did you handle it? Did you forgive, confront, or walk away? Share your story in the comments below. I'd truly like to know. If this story spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening.